Hi, I'm RobCosman. Welcome to my shop. Had lots of questions about our new tool. It's called the Shawn Shim, designed to make your dovetails even more accurate. Going to show you how to use it. I'm RobCosman, and welcome to my shop. We make it our job to help you take your woodworking to the next level. If you're new to our channel, be sure to subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and don't forget to turn on the notification on your mobile device so you'll know every time we release a new video. Good? All right, back to the bench. As a result of a lot of folks asking exactly how to use this and why there are several different sizes on it, we decided to do this video to explain it so that you can actually better utilize it, and as I mentioned, even make your dovetails even better. And a little history on it. So we taught a class in 2017, and we had one of the vets attending. His name was Shawn McDermott, and he came up with this idea for offsetting the dovetail, or for measuring the offset of the dovetail. And it took a few years for us to really grasp how effective it was going to be. It turned out to be extremely effective. So, of course, now it's called the Shawn Shim after Shawn McDermott. Big shout out to Shawn for coming up with such a great idea. So I'm going to go through, and if you have not seen how we use this in cutting a dovetail, I suggest you take a look at the video. We'll leave a link below. But I'm going to show you some of the options and why, as I mentioned, there are four different settings on each one of these. Let me begin by explaining to you how this idea came about. 1971, Ernest Joyce wrote a book called The Encyclopedia of Furniture Making. And I think it's probably the best text that's ever been written, complete, on both hand tools and power tools. His method of laying out the dovetail had one aspect about it that I loved and another one that I didn't. So what he would do, before he removed the waste, already made the cuts on the tails, but before the waste was removed, now I'll mark this in just so that you understand what I'm talking about. This is the waste. These are the pieces that ultimately will be removed, and they'll be replaced with pins from the pin board. So he would line up the two pieces. He would take his saw, and he would put it in the kerf and drag it through and do that for each one. And what I liked about that was the way we always did it is we would remove the waste, and then you would come in with a marking knife and you would scribe onto the pin board the dark piece. You would trace the tails, and then you would have to try to saw beside this knife line, which the older you got, the more difficult it became. And the really nice thing about this is once you put that blade in there, it can't slide to the right or to the left. So your mark was going to be in the correct spot. Here was the problem. If you were to look down from the top, you realize that this dark piece that's going to produce the pin, that's going to fill in this gap, has to fill in from out here right to this side of the tail, which means you have to replace this piece of wood plus the kerf. If I were to simply saw in that kerf as it is, it would leave this half pin too small by the thickness of one saw kerf. And if you did that to both of these kerfs, this inside pin would be left too small by two saw kerfs. The other problem was that in the process of trying to saw beside that mark, your saw is wanting to slide over into it, which makes it for a difficult process. And third, once you're finished, you've got a mark in your pin that you have to make sure you leave enough space so that you can plane all of that away, which, particularly in doing drawers, isn't that easy. So I got the idea one time. I said, if the mark is in the wrong spot, what would it take to get the mark in the right spot? Well, if the kerf is in the pin and you don't want it to be, then you simply have to move this piece, the tailboard, over by the thickness of one saw kerf, and that would put it where it needs to be. Okay, so how do you measure the saw kerf? Well, I started off by simply taking my dovetail saw, taking my marking gauge, setting it carefully just on the saw, dropping this down until it touched the plane underneath, locking it, and now that cutter was sticking up above the head of this tool by a saw kerf, which includes the saw plate plus the set on both sides. And it wasn't difficult because you would simply set it like this, move the piece over, slide it, and that would be your measurement. Now, that's okay for, in this case, the right side of each tail, but in order to do the opposite side of each tail, you had to move this tailboard in the opposite direction by 1 saw kerf, which meant balancing your marking gauge with the cutter down below, meaning down below the end of the pin board, and then slide that over until it touched the head of the tool, and now you had that same offset, and you would go ahead and mark the other side. For some folks trying to balance that out there, or even just trying to get that exact by referencing it off the side of your plane on top of your saw, wasn't always that easy. So now what we do, knowing that on a brand new saw, our kerf is going to be 24 thousandths of an inch, so we're going to use the 24 thou measurement. The top part is thinner by that amount than the piece below. So if it's 24 thou here, that's what the offset is compared to this. And on this side, it's 26 thou offset from this piece to this piece. Both ends are labeled. Why are they both labeled? Well, you're going to use the smaller one to move the tailboard to the right to mark the left side of each tail. And then you flip it over and push the tailboard to the left by the offset amount, and now you use that to mark the right side of each tail. It's pretty simple. All right, now to answer the question, why the other numbers? If your saw, my saw right now has a saw plate that is 20 thousandths of an inch, and just for reference, that would be the equivalent of 5 sheets of writing paper, each piece being 4 thousandths of an inch thick. The set, meaning the amount that each tooth is bent away from the plate, is 2 thousandths of an inch per side, for a total of 24 thousandths of an inch. That's the reason why you use a 24 thou. However, when I sharpen this, if you think about it, in the process of sharpening, you're actually going to reduce that set ever so slightly. At some point, you may be down to 23 thousandths of an inch. You get much below that, and you're probably going to want to reset your saw. But there's another reason. Shakers would often use pine, northern white pine, for their drawer sides up against a much harder pin board or drawer front, which may be walnut, ash, maple, birch. In those circumstances, because the pine will compress a little bit, it's actually nice to make it a little bit tighter. And you can do that by simply, instead of going 24 thou, so if you understand this, if we're flush, this and cut through that kerf, this half pin would end up being too thin by 24 thousandths of an inch. If we move it over, then the half pin is going to be the exact size. If we move it over a little bit more, in other words, we turn it to 25 thousandths, then it's going to make that pin an additional 1 thou thicker. So you can often use a little, you can make it the joint a little bit tighter, which actually comes out for a better joint when using a softwood on one piece compared to a hardwood on the other piece. In this circumstance, I've got a piece of maple and a piece of walnut. You'd want to have the exact setting. Neither one of these is going to compress, and making it too tight may very well cause it to split. But that gives you the flexibility. It also allows some other saws to be able to be used that don't have or have more set than mine. That's the reasoning why we have the 4 different options on each Shawn Shim. Hey, if you like this video, we have more. Our newsletter has subscriber-only content, monthly discount on tools, and anything we bring out that's new, subscribers get first crack at it. Click on the link below. Let's get back to work. If you want to make this even easier to do, you can take your Shawn Shim with a small clamp, put that right on the side, and simply clamp it in place. Now, that gives you 2 hands to go in there and work the joint, holding that firmly and going in with your dovetail marking knife. And of course, you can flip it around and do the same thing on the other side. I also should mention at this point one other thing. I always prefer to do both settings from the same side, meaning do this one when you're moving your tailboard to the right, and when you're flipping it around and moving the tailboard to the left, always reference off the same side, just in case one piece is narrower than the other. It won't throw you off. And you want to make sure that this is square and this is square to the face so that it's actually flat on and not on a bit of an angle. It'll guarantee you have good, accurate results. So if that doesn't quite fit your kerf, we also make a small one. We call this the 3/4 Shawn Shim. And that's partially due to the fact that we came up with a new saw. So this little saw for cutting small dovetails, think jewelry box size. This one has a saw plate of 15 thousandths of an inch. The set is 2 thou per side, so now I'm using a 19 thou kerf. And again, I have a range from 18 to 21 to allow for any adjustments, the same as we did on the regular Shawn Shim. So this may fit a saw with a thinner plate and obviously less set. Either way, if you're looking at a simple, easy way to make your dovetails far more precise, we just taught a class, 12 people in the class that had never cut dovetails before, and they were able to get perfect fit on the top side. Now this isn't going to help you get your plumb cut right, but as far as the actual top side of the joint, it'll come out without a flaw. Shawn Shim. Thank you, Sean McDermott. If you like my work and enjoy my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos and help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said, better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the link below, the chisel and plane icon, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our online and in-person workshops.